Hey everybody, welcome. Glad that you are joining us today for the online gathering of the Pathways Church community. My name is Nick, and I want to be the first just to welcome you here into this space. If you're on YouTube or Facebook, maybe you linked over to YouTube from Facebook, that's fine. Those of you who are, here gathered in this online space, go ahead and say hi to each other in the comments. That would be a fantastic way just to greet one another. It is a crazy, smoky weekend in the Pacific Northwest. We've had some good weather, but I mean, it is super smoky out there, so hopefully you are inside somewhere where the air is a little bit cleaner today. Now, we want to welcome you to this space, and if this is your first time meeting up with this group, or perhaps if you've been a part of this group here for a little bit, participating online, maybe you've never gone to our website, findpathways.com. You can read up a little bit more on who we are, some of the things that we value. We have our core values listed at the bottom corner of the screen here, but online we kind of explain what we mean by some of those words a little bit. And the general idea is that we kind of see ourselves as a group of traveling companions. We are pursuing the way of Jesus. And as we do that, some of us have been on this path for quite a while. Others of us have been on this journey for just a very short time. But none of us have all the answers, and we are learning what it means to follow Jesus in real time together, no matter how long we've been on this journey. And in some sense, it's the journey itself that is the destination. As we're journeying together, we're learning to love each other a little bit more, to take care of each other better, to love people around us. And that is what is shaping us and molding us to become like the person of Jesus. So if you want to read about some of these core values, they're the things we've chosen to value along the way in our journey together. Now, we usually do describe ourselves a couple ways, usually just using two words. We describe ourselves as both cautious and curious. We are a cautious bunch in that many of us have grown up in religious environments, and we've seen religion used in some really positive ways, but we've also seen religion used in some really negative ways. In fact, many of us today have a hard time even calling ourselves Christians or wanting to be associated with a lot of religion, even religion that bears Jesus' name today, because for many of us, it's been used in harmful ways, or it hasn't lived up to all that we hoped that it would. And so we find ourselves being a little bit of a cautious bunch, about organized religion. We're kind of not so sure what to make of it. And it's weird because we are a church, but also skeptical of a lot of church. And so we find ourselves in this oddly cautious space. But at the same time, we're very curious. And we're a group that likes to ask a lot of questions. We think that faith is really strengthened by our questioning, that doubt is actually even a part of faith. And so we're a group that likes to ask a lot of questions, to maybe rethink things that we had been taught or thought previously ourselves. And so if either of those two words kind of describes maybe where you are, cautious or curious or both, this might be a pretty good group here for you. Now, a couple things that we're going to be doing today. As always, Billy, our worship leader, is going to lead us in some singing here. He's got two songs, and in between his little video, it actually is about doubt being a part of faith. And then after those songs and that little video, we're going to get into our sermon today. And we're doing a series on the hard sayings of Jesus. 6 sayings of Jesus that are difficult to understand and are easy to kind of manipulate into some ways that can be harmful. And so we're reading those and talking about what the heck do we do with these texts. They're very strange. And so today is one of the stranger ones. And so we get to dig into that. And then after that, we're going to take communion together. And so the reason I bring that up now is in our in-person gatherings, we provide some bread and we provide a cup. The elements that you would need for communion. However, on this online space, you'll need to provide those yourself. So if you're at home and you want to participate in this at the end, you need to go raid the pantry right now for some crackers, like a cracker or a little piece of bread, and something to drink, whether it's juice or some wine left over from the night before. Just get those items on hand. You can do that anytime here, and you'll be ready to join us for communion at the end. Okay? And then we'll wrap up with some announcements just to finish this whole thing off. All right, let's get right to it. We've got a lot to cover today, so Billy, why don't you take us away on some music, and we'll get going.
Song of all songs is the song we sing. Song of our sounds, heaven's symphony. Songs of love to you from us all. Songs of praise, you're the one we adore. We're gonna sing out aloud as heaven is us and comes down in this day that we live. We'll show our love with such awesome praise. You are great and greatly to be praised in all the earth, in all the earth. You are strong and powerful in all the world, in all the heavens. You are God, so wonderful. All of heaven knows your name. You are great and greatly to be praised. Sing song of all. Song of all songs is the song we sing. Sound of all sounds, heaven's symphony. Songs of love to you from us all. Songs of praise, you're the one we adore. We're gonna sing out aloud as heaven is us and comes down in this day that we live. We'll show our love with such awesome praise. You are great and greatly to be praised in all the earth, in all the earth. You are strong and powerful in all the world, in all the heavens. You are God, so wonderful. All of heaven knows your name.
I think that doubt is part of faith.
What? You think that doubt is part of faith?
I
That
think-
thing kills faith.
I think that I think it takes quite a lot of faith to doubt, actually. I think it takes no faith at all to just assume, to take for granted what I've always been told, to just say yes, 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 and acknowledge it and go along there, and feel nice and secure in that. It takes quite a lot of faith to sort of question and step outside of the little box and be prepared to deconstruct a few things, to say, what if? What if I've got all this wrong, you know? I think I was talking to a very lovely atheist this week, actually. He came to an interfaith forum that I was taking part in, and he said that from his perspective, he thought that what religion does is sort of feed you wrong motives, because he said, you know, he thought the religious people live a particular way or make certain decisions because they think that way they're not going to go to hell, you know, they'll go to heaven and blah, blah, blah. Whereas he said, I just do them because I think they're right to do. And, you know, he's got a point there. He's got a point that I think if you know, motivation, because that's what people say, well, okay, so if you don't believe in these 6 things here, well, why don't you just, you know, murder people and well, actually, because that's not the sort of person I am. That's not how I think. You know, it's not because I'm going to get a reward or a damn good eternal smacking that I choose to live in a particular way, to not kind of cheat on my wife and, you know, rob people, you know, through defrauding taxes or whatever else it is. It's because actually this is the sort of person I think I ought to be, and I think that if at the end of the day, or let's put it like this, I think if it could be proven, which it can't, but if it could be proven beyond doubt right now that the entirety of my faith is a sham and has no reality behind it at all, I can't imagine wanting to live as a different type of person than I am now, because that's just seems like what human beings should be like, really. Now, my faith actually feeds into it enormously and gives me great inspiration and strength and courage to pursue being the sort of person that I want to be. But it has more to do with what I think about humanity. And I often say, you know, that if we want to discover more divinity, we need more humanity. I think that's how I know God, in the depths of humanity, really, and what being truly human means.
Walking around these walls, I thought by now they'd fall, but you have never failed me yet. Waiting for change to come, knowing the battle's won, for you have never failed me yet. Your promise still stands, great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands, This is my confidence. You never failed me yet. I know the night won't last. Your word will come to pass. My heart will sing your praise again. Jesus, you're still enough. Keep me within your love. Oh, my heart will sing your praise again. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness. Faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness. Faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never failed me yet. Never failed me yet. I've seen you move. You move the mountains, and I believe I see you do it again. Made a way when there was no way, and I believe I see you do it again. See you move. You move the mountains, and I believe. Do you do it again? Made a way, and there was no way, and I believe I see you do it again. See you move, you move the mountains, and I believe I see you do it again. You made a way when there was no way, and I believe I see you do it again. I see you move. You move the mountains, and I believe. And do you do it again? You made a way when there was no way, and I believe I see you do it again. I see you do it again. Oh Lord, again. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness. Faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness. Faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never failed me yet. You never
Oh, that's great. Want to say thank you to Sarah once again there for putting together our little bumper there on the hard sayings of Jesus. She put together a little bumper there, and it shows Jesus tweeting out, putting out some different thoughts out there, and people are liking it, hearting it, like, yeah, right on, Jesus. And then all of a sudden he starts tweeting out some of our hard sayings that we've been looking at in our series here. And people start mixing their responses with a little bit of confusion and questioning and wondering, what the heck is Jesus saying? And so I want to thank her for putting that together. Hey, one of my very favorite games when I was in youth ministry was a little game we would call Would You Rather. You ever played this game? It's a great little icebreaker game. You get people together and you play Would You Rather, and you throw out two things and then you get them talking about which of these two options they would prefer. So, even though this is an online medium, I thought we would play a little game of Would You Rather today. All right, so you can play along right here at home. If you're sitting next to someone, you can play along with them and hear their responses. Or you can just shout out whatever you think to your television set or phone or whatever else you are watching this on. So let me give you a couple Would You Rathers here. Okay, the first one. Would you rather give up heating and air conditioning for the rest of your life, meaning you have no furnace in your house, you have no air conditioning, you just got to roll with the elements, or would you rather give up using the internet for the rest of your life? Would you rather freeze all the time, be too hot, or would you rather give up the internet for the rest of your life? That's a pretty hard one. It might take a second to think that one through, right? I mean, because the internet is just fantastic. It's amazing. I have all these sports conversations with buddies, we're like, hey, do you remember who did this or that back in, 1989? And we used to, nobody would really know, and you could never solve those discussions. But now, through the miracle of a little phone in our pocket, we can always figure out who was right in those conversations. So, would you rather be exposed to the elements or have the internet? Would you rather? Which one? Which is it? Oh, I can't hear you anyway. Okay, here's the next one. Would you rather be in jail for the next 5 years? We won't talk about how you got there. Would you rather be in jail for the next 5 years, or would you rather be in a coma for the next 10 years? All right. Now, on the one hand, 5 years is half the amount of time of 10, obviously, but you have to experience being in jail, whereas you'll be double the length of time in a coma, but you won't remember it. I mean, you'll just be asleep. So would you rather be in a coma for 10 years, miss a decade of your life, or have to go to prison for 5 years? Now, that's a pretty tough one. There are no maybe good answers, but it's just which would you rather, not which is best, but which would you personally rather, jail for 5 years or a coma for a decade? Okay, here's another one. Would you rather be able to see into the future for 10 minutes, just 10 minutes ahead? That's it. You have this weird superpower where you could only see 10 minutes into the future, but you could see what would happen 10 minutes from now accurately, okay? Or would you rather be able to see 150 years into the future? Another weird superpower where you can't see 10 minutes into the future. You can only see far out 150 years. So which would you rather see? Would you rather be able to see 10 minutes ahead of yourself all the time, or only 150 years ahead? Tough question. Okay, and here is a final one. Would you rather know something in advance will be really hard before you start it? Would you rather somebody warn you that, hey, this thing you're about to engage in is going to be really difficult? Or would you rather not know in advance so that you don't end up worrying about it? The old saying, ignorance is bliss. Which would you rather? A hard dose of reality, here's something difficult coming your way, or would you rather just live without the knowledge that it's going to be hard so that you don't end up worrying about it? That might tell a little bit about your personality, kind of which one you like there. You want to know the truth up front, or sort of live in ignorance there? Well, actually, that one is sort of the question of our text today, because we're wondering here, how honest do we really want Jesus to be with us about following him? Now, as I said, we're doing this series called The Hard Sayings of Jesus, and we're looking at 6 specific sayings or statements where Jesus says something that is both difficult to understand, where sometimes we're left scratching our head wondering, what does he even mean by this? But then the more difficult part is sometimes even applying it, because when we're not sure exactly what he means, it makes it difficult to apply. And sometimes these things have even been applied in ways that harm or affect other people negatively. And so we've been reading these statements and saying, what the heck do we do with these things? What do we make of them? Now, when we've been reading these statements, we did one last week where Jesus came up to a man and told him to sell everything he owns and give all the money to the poor. When we read these statements, what we've been trying to do in this series is ask a lot of questions to actually interrogate the text, to ask it all of the questions that come to mind. And today is no exception, because what Jesus says here seems so harsh. In fact, it seems like he's calling people to hatred. So let's read it here. Luke 14, 25 to 26, and I'm sure we'll have a lot of questions coming out of this, okay? Luke 14, starting in verse 25. Large crowds were traveling with Jesus, and turning to them, he said, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate their father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple." Now, would you agree that's a pretty weird statement here? Here we have Jesus, once again, giving another qualifier for becoming one of his disciples. And it sort of turns out that Jesus does have these qualifiers oftentimes for people who want to be his disciples. Now, last week we saw another one of these qualifiers where a young man came to Jesus who was rich, young, and in a position of influence and power. And Jesus specifically told this young man to sell everything that he owned and give it all away to the poor. And as we talked about it last week, it seemed pretty clear that Jesus wasn't addressing that instruction to all people everywhere at all times. It seemed as though he was addressing that particular bit of instruction to that one specific man. But today, in our hard saying, what we see is he is not addressing one individual person, so we can just kind of slough it off and say, well, it doesn't apply to me, that only applied to him. Today, he appears to be addressing not a single person, but an entire crowd of people, which means this is a much more general instruction rather than person-specific. And so we might have to deal with this one a little bit more here. And the tricky part is it seems rather harsh, doesn't it? Here's Jesus, the guy who is calling us to follow him in a life of radical love, telling us that we can only do it if we embrace hate. We can only follow him in his way of love if we hate those around us that we know and love the most. That's kind of weird, isn't it? And so what do we make of this statement of Jesus? Do we have to hate in order to love? Now, we want to ask good questions here in this series and of these statements of Jesus. And I kind of like to think of this one today as if Jesus was standing right here in front of us, right? If I could just pull him on screen here, right? And he couldn't get away and he just had to be here and answer our questions. If we got him right here on the screen with us today, I'd kind of like to ask him a few questions about this statement, wouldn't you? I have a few questions. If he was just talking to a crowd of people, I'd be like kind of trying to get my hand up in the air like, Jesus, I got a question here. And maybe you do too, but here's one of the ones I think I would be itching to ask right away. And that is simply, what exactly do you mean, by hate? Hate is kind of a strong word, isn't it? Probably we shouldn't just use the word hate just all flippantly, although we do, right? Hate is a word that is used probably too frequently. It's sort of overused. And I try not to use the word hate too often because it is so strong, but it ends up being an overused word. A lot like the word love, right? Love is one of those words that's overused as well. For instance, I love pizza, but I also love my wife. And that's not exactly the same type of love. There's a few nuanced differences there, right? It's not exactly the same thing, but we end up using the word to describe both. And hate is also like that. It's a little bit overused. For instance, I will say I hate eggplant and asparagus. Those two things are gross. They're absolutely disgusting. Humans should not be eating them. And what's more, we shouldn't even be growing them. They're absolutely disgusting. Nobody should be eating asparagus or eggplant. They are completely awful. I'm sure that's a verse in the Bible somewhere, and that you're sinning if you are forcing your children to eat these vegetables, okay? I hate eggplant and asparagus, all right? That's what I would say. I hate those things. But that's not exactly the same as the way that I hate the Dallas Cowboys. And I do. I hate the Dallas Cowboys. Now, when I say that I hate these things, eggplant and asparagus and the Dallas Cowboys, I use the word hate here sometimes, but really, it's more like degrees of dislike. Now, when we use the word hate, it's a strong word because, of course, there is a whole other category of hate that people have towards other groups of people, religious groups, people of different nationalities, people different racial makeups, even people of different sexual preferences. And this type of hate we have seen play out in our society many, many times. It's a hate that involves mistreatment of people, often violence, often oppression, and on down the line. So when Jesus says the word hate here, it's pretty loaded, right? I mean, the word hate is pretty loaded for us, but it also is pretty loaded for the people that Jesus is talking to. And so one of the big questions we want to ask here of Jesus is, what exactly do you mean when you say hate? Because it seems like Jesus can't be calling us to hate people with violence and discrimination and oppression, right? That just doesn't seem to fit with Jesus here. But it also seems kind of weird that he'd be calling us to dislike people the way that we dislike eggplants and certain sports teams too. So what could Jesus mean when he says to hate your father and mother, to hate your spouse and children, and yes, even your own self, in order to be my disciple? How is it that hate can lead us to discipleship? Well, it might be helpful to know that the gospel writer Luke here, which is where we've found our hard saying today, that Luke actually uses this word hate 6 other times in his gospel. It's not that infrequent of a word. It crops up a half dozen times in his gospel. And it might also be interesting to know that in every one of these instances where Luke uses the word hate, hate is something that is actually being employed against Jesus himself, against the followers of Jesus, or the people of God generally. And only in our hard saying here from this passage that we just read in Luke chapter 14, is hate here something that Jesus' followers are called to engage in. In every other text, it's something happening to them or to Jesus himself. So let's take a look at some of these other places where the word hate is used. It's used right at the beginning of Luke, actually. In Luke chapter 1, there's a man named Zechariah, and he has gone through a life-changing experience, and he prophesies something where he ends up using the word hate here. So Luke chapter 1, verse 67 is where it starts. His father, Zechariah, that is John the Baptist's father, was filled with the Holy Spirit and prophesied, "Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, because he has come to his people and redeemed them. He has raised up a horn of salvation for us in the house of his servant David, as he said through his holy prophets of long ago. Salvation from our enemies and from the hand of," and here we are, "all who hate us, to show mercy to our ancestors and to remember his holy covenant, the oath he swore to our father Abraham, to rescue us from the hand of our enemies and to enable us to serve him without fear in holiness and righteousness before him all our days." Now in this text here, we see Zechariah speaking of people and saying that God has come to save us from all who hate us. Now Zechariah here is speaking of people who hate God's chosen people, the people of Israel. And this, as Zechariah is talking here, is reaching all the way back into history, right? He's thinking of all the hate that has been aimed at the people of God from the beginning. He has the picture of Egypt's hate of the people of Israel in mind. He has the picture of Babylon's hate of the people of Israel. He has the picture of the burning of the Jewish temple and the hateful work of Antiochus IV Epiphanes, who Antiochus actually persecuted the Jewish people and sacrificed pigs as pagan offerings inside of the temple. I mean, he probably has in mind the occupation of Rome. He has in mind the hate of the enemies of his people and their oppression of his people from ages and ages past. And this is a type of hate that we are pretty familiar with, isn't it? Hate that is aimed at a group of people. And we're familiar with this type of hate too. Zechariah is kind of bringing up all the hate that his people have experienced over the years, but we're familiar with that kind of hate, aren't we? We also live in a world that is full of hate. Even today in the modern world, there are plenty of hate groups out there who are looking to do harm. And many of these hate groups are still motivated by religious ideas. And we are familiar with what these hate-filled things look like. Maybe they begin with a nasty tweet here or there, but we've seen white supremacy marches. We've seen people holding up signs to disparage people of different religions or different sexual orientations. I mean, in the news, we hear stories of swastikas being painted on someone's house or in their place of business. I mean, we know all too well through the headlines of today how people hate their enemies. And that is what Zechariah is saying here. We've had some enemies, and their hate has come our way. And we're familiar with that today. The hate of an enemy. Now, why are they enemies? Well, sometimes it seems just because we disagree with them, or sometimes because someone is different than us. Sometimes, as we have discovered in Israel's history and in our own history, that hate is something that can be handed down throughout generations. Now, obviously, this type of hate is abhorrent to Jesus, and that doesn't seem to be at all what Jesus is talking about here. In fact, you remember, Jesus also says that we are to do what to our enemies? Love our enemies. And so he can't mean to then employ the hatred that in the world people express toward their enemy, toward other people here in this text. Now, here's another example of where hate is used in the Gospel of Luke. And this might get us a little closer. Luke 6, verse 22, Jesus, and this is sort of Luke's version of the Sermon on the Mount, his version of the Beatitudes. Luke 6, verse 22, "Blessed are you when people hate you, when they exclude you and insult you and reject your name as evil because of the Son of Man." Now here, in this case, hate is something done towards the disciples, not what they are to do to anyone else. But this time, it isn't so much about a history of hate towards the people of Israel, but this isn't really about nationality or race or religion so much. This isn't even really hate from the outside. This is hate coming from the inside, from within the group. Hate being thrown the disciples' way because of their commitment to Jesus. In fact, Luke sort of repeats it a little later on in chapter 21. He says something similar. "You will be betrayed even by parents, brothers and sisters, relatives and friends, and they will put some of you to death. Everyone will hate you because of me." Now that seems to sort of mirror in part here what Jesus has been saying in our difficult saying here in Luke 14, doesn't it? Using kind of even the similar relationships. And the idea here is that these people are going to hate you. In other words, this is personal. Jesus is anticipating people's response to his followers learning to live in a new way that is dominated by love. That all of a sudden when this happens, when you begin to live not by the values of a power over culture, but instead by the values of the cross, that you are going to then be at odds, not just with outsiders, but with insiders. And what Jesus seems to be anticipating here is that his followers are going to be at odds with those even within their own religious background. They're going to get in trouble with those who are guarding the rules of the religion that they grew up in. You see, Jesus is going to break some rules, isn't he? And he is going to call his disciples to do the very same thing. And when they do this, when they follow in the pattern of Jesus, sometimes upsetting these religious rules that have been there for quite a while, they are going to be branded as heretics, condemned by the religious authorities, disowned by their families. And they're not going to be altogether popular with the government either, right? I mean, not just the insiders in their religion, but even just kind of nationally here. And at this time, the Jews are occupied by Rome. And Rome has a Lord. Caesar calls himself Lord. But these disciples of Jesus dare to call Jesus Lord. They believed that their authority was higher than Caesar himself, and they didn't even worship the gods of Rome, the many gods of the Roman Empire, and they only worship Jesus, and so they're considered atheists by many in Rome. They don't play the power dynamics game of the empire, and so they threatened the power of Rome. And in fact, many later, these disciples, many of them would be killed as traitors to the empire. Why? Because how dare you say that there's something greater than Rome itself? Everyone knows that Rome is the greatest country on God's green earth. It is the gift of the gods to earth. And these followers of Jesus, they would dare criticize its values. They would live against its values. And they claimed a citizenship in another kingdom that was far superior. And so Rome had many of these traitors killed. And so for the followers of Jesus' way, hate came, and Jesus is telling them to expect this, that hate is coming not just from the outside, but also from the inside, from within your own country, from within your own people, from within your own religion. And Jesus appears to be just letting his disciples know to expect this right up front, letting them know this is going to be hard at times. He's letting them know what to expect. And perhaps we should too. He's letting them know right up front the cost of what it will mean to be his disciple. Now, the time we live in today, I have found that we may need to count that cost of discipleship as well. Because I found that even in my closest family relationships over the last few years, some of them have become quite strained. And many of them have become strained because of my allegiance to Jesus, especially over the last 4 years or so, which is strange to me, but many of multiple of my close family relationships have become strained because I have some family that thinks that I've actually turned my back on the religion I was taught simply because I think Jesus calls us to love all people. Immigrants, gay couples, Muslims, people with different political beliefs, and on and on. And some of my family thinks that I have turned my back on the religion I grew up in because I break some of the religious rules that they grew up with. I mean, I have some of my family that thinks I'm a traitor to my country because I think Jesus wants me to seek the welfare of all people in every country and not just simply put my needs or my country first. I have some people in my family who think that I have betrayed my country because my commitment to Jesus leads me to believe that war and military violence is wrong, even if it helps the bottom line of the USA. You see, I've lost some friendships and some close family relationships because my allegiance to Jesus has upset their idea of who I am. And perhaps you have too. And it hurts, doesn't it? You know, when I first started in on this journey of following Jesus, I didn't really think I was going to experience these feelings. Because I grew up in church. I mean, my dad was a preacher. So most of my family are evangelical Christians. You know, I just come from a churched family that's been going to church for generations. And I assumed that people outside of the church would make fun of me for believing in God. But most of my family is actually of the evangelical Christian tribe. And I would never have believed early on when I set on this path to follow Jesus that my commitment to Jesus would put me on the outs with those inside the church, or even some of my own family. But it has. I know now that most churches I grew up in would never hire me because I don't fit their mold. And that is a strange realization. And that, I think, gets us closer to what Jesus intends to convey in this very hard saying. I don't think Jesus is trying to mobilize his disciples into another hate group, right? When he says to go hate these people, I don't think he's trying to mobilize us into another one of those hate groups motivated by religion to hate all the people around you who disagree with you. I think he's trying to let his disciples, or his potential disciples, know right up front that following him might cause them some anguish, even from those closest to them. Jesus uses this word hate here, using the visceral and emotional imagery of this word hate and all that it conjures into our minds to illustrate how much it may cost to follow him. But the point here is, I think, for Jesus, that we are to count the cost before we start. I think his whole point here is, you don't realize there's going to be some trouble for you on down the line if you really live this way. It's not always going to be easy, and I want you to know right from the beginning what you're getting into. Jesus isn't just trying to sell us a bill of goods. He wants us to know right from the beginning, this could be harder than you think. And I think that fits into the context of where Jesus says this statement, this idea that preparing the disciples to count the cost. Let's read it in context here. Luke 14. We'll start here again. Here on the screen. We'll start again at verse 25. Large crowds were traveling with Jesus, and turning to them, he said, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yet, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple. And whoever does not carry their cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? For if you lay the foundation and are not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule you, saying, 'This person began to build and wasn't able to finish.' Or suppose a king is about to go to war against another king. Won't he first sit down and consider whether he's able with 10,000 men to oppose the one coming against him with 20,000? If he is not able, he will send a delegation while the other is still a long way off and will ask for terms of peace. In the same way, those of you who do not give up everything you have cannot be my disciple." You see, in context here, what Jesus is saying in this hard saying appears to be that before you follow me, you got this big crowd of people here, right? You're all interested in following me. It's popular to follow me around right now because I'm doing all these miracles and saying things that make people feel good. But I want you to know, to really live like me, I want you to know right up front, it isn't all easy. And it appears here that Jesus prefers to shoot straight with us rather than try to sell us something as easy. And it's sort of strange, isn't it? The tension in following Jesus. Because in one sense, following the way of Jesus is easy. Jesus says, "My burden is easy and my yoke is light." Living into his way of love can feel so easy. But in another way, it's very hard. And few people choose it. Narrow is the path, and there is a cross to bear. It's strange, this way of Jesus. It's both easy and hard. And Jesus invites us into an easy way of life, but also warns us that it will come with suffering, just as it did for him. Now, the second question I'd like to ask Jesus, if we had him on the screen here today, is it kind of makes sense here. What do you mean by hate? And if we kind of break it down here and see that it appears that Jesus is really, by using this word, warning us of all the dangers of hate and how we are going to have to make some choices of our allegiances. But we do have a strange part here in Luke 14:26, where Jesus says that not only are our relationships with people we care most about, our parents, our families, our brothers and sisters, but he says even our own life. And the other question I'd like to ask Jesus is, should we really hate ourselves? I mean, it makes sense here that Jesus is using some clever language. He's using a word like hate that's loaded with a lot of meaning and significance to kind of warn us, right, of how strained our relationships might be because of our commitment to Jesus. But what about this hating your own life business? I mean, do I really need to hate myself? Shouldn't I should not enjoy life? I mean, I shouldn't like myself. I shouldn't love myself. I have to hate my own life and wish I was dead. I mean, it seems like such a weird thing to say. And so maybe it's important for us to look at this word life. Now, the word life is the Greek word psyche. And it's where we get the word psyche or psychology, right? And it doesn't exactly mean life per se. It's more a sense of self or soul or identity. You could say life, but it's really more this sense of self. Now, of course, many of us derive our life or our sense of worth with markers that we use to create our own identity. And we are to leave those behind in order to follow Jesus. And as Jesus does in other places, he's letting us know here that following him supersedes all other places where we get our sense of worth or identity. To be a disciple of Jesus means to form your identity around Jesus and his kingdom of love above and beyond anything else. And it mirrors other statements we have in Luke, like, for instance, Luke 9, verse 23, Jesus said to them all, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will save it." Or Luke 17:33, where he says something similar, "Whoever tries to keep their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life will preserve it." What Jesus is calling here for is not to hate yourself and what it means to be alive. What he's really asking you is, what is it that you value most? What is it that you prioritize first and is your primary identity? And if you want to think of it this way, it appears that he is asking, when he says it even hates your own life, it appears that he's asking, what is it you're willing to even die for? Again, he's not calling us to hate ourselves. He's just asking us to count the cost. A.J. Levine, she says this great in her book. The point is not that we should hate life and therefore rather be dead. The point is that we turn to Jesus and in so doing turn away from the earlier markers of our identity. No longer boat owners or farmers, vineyard workers or potters. The followers of Jesus are first and foremost disciples. You see, this is a great call to renounce the identity markers in everything besides the identity we find in Jesus and his kingdom. And that's hard to do, isn't it? Because I get my sense of self-worth and identity from a lot of things. Sometimes I get it from my job, right? We do that sometimes, don't we? From the things that we do. Who am I without this job? Who am I without these things that I do, the performance that I put forth and the things that I create? Who am I if I can't do those things? Our identity and self-worth is wrapped up in that. Sometimes our identity and self-worth comes from our family background or our ethnic background or our cultural background. Who am I? If I am not a person of this family or this tribe or this nation. Sometimes we get our identity from a sense of nationality. Who am I if not American? Or from our religious affiliation. I'm a Christian, right? And that gives me some sort of identity with all the things that go with that. Sometimes we get our identity, wow, we see this a lot currently, from our political party of preference. That we can't challenge anything that our particular brand of politics puts forward because our identity is so tied up in it. To critique a political party feels like a critique of ourselves. Now, none of these things that begin to shape our identity are inherently bad, but all of them, when they become the sole way we define our lives, or even just the primary ways that we do, they become idols. And when we get too familiar, too cozy with them, they take the wrong place in our life. And Jesus here appears to be using a very hard statement, inviting us to rethink our very identity. And wow, maybe nothing is more needed today. Because church and society is splintered, fractured, at each other's throats because our identities are so entrenched in tribal categories that pit ourselves against one another. It's us versus them. And Jesus is saying we should hate these false identities. Jesus' use of the word hate here forces us to look at the idea of hatred. I think it's why he uses it. It is a brilliant use where it conjures up all these ideas and how hate has harmed us and other people. It forces us to confront its ugliness and to choose to hate in order to embrace a new way of love. Even if it puts us at odds with people that we know and love, even if it puts it at odds with our traditions or our religious backgrounds or our national interests, or even our previous way of getting our sense of self-worth from all other things. Jesus uses this strong statement here to force us to ask questions. And we ask these questions of Jesus by what he means. But in asking these questions, you know what begins to happen. Jesus' words begin to question us. Do you really want to embrace the way of love? See, Jesus, through this hard statement, is forcing us to ask some questions. What do you value above all? What do you value more than love? What might it cost you to truly follow Jesus with your whole life? Studying out this hard saying may not answer every question we have about what Jesus has to say, but we are left with some deep questions, introspective questions of ourselves, of where our allegiances truly lie. We're left with a lot of questions. Maybe not the ones we started with, but with the ones that really matter. Jesus wants to know, will we choose love or hate? Let's choose love. We want to go to communion today, and we want to remember the deep love that God has for us. You know, what's interesting about hate is that hate is obviously something that usually starts by something they do to us, right? That's the way that we think of it. And hate is made manifest through actions, you know, threats or signs or whatever else, violence. Really, hate provokes violence. That's what it does. Persecution, death, genocide. Hate is taught. It's handed down through generations. But love is sort of the antithesis. Love is demonstrated first to us. It's not something others do to us, but it is first demonstrated to us through Jesus himself, and then we reflect it on to others. Love also is manifest in action through kindness, through compassion, through generosity. Love doesn't provoke violence, but it inspires kindness and goodness. Love can also be taught and learned and handed down. And so as we go to the communion table today, we ask that Jesus would teach the way of love to us. Jesus, we come to you today. We're so grateful that you do love us. We're grateful that you have shown us first what it means to love. We get confused on what love is, and you have come to demonstrate to us exactly what love is, that you would give up your life for us. And we confess that we're not always good at following in that pattern, and we pray that you would continue to teach the way of love in us. Won't you help us to identify the places of hate in our own heart? Won't you help us to eradicate it and embrace completely your way of love? We thank you, Jesus, that you've not only died for us to rid us of the guilt and the sin that's in our own life, but to also show us a way forward to live. We love you. And it's in your name we pray. Amen. We want to go to communion here. Billy's going to lead us in a song and a time of singing. And if you want to take communion during this time, you can do that. And then I'll come back and wrap up with some announcements. Okay? Billy, take it away.
Your faithfulness, oh God. You wrestle with the sinner's heart. You lead us by still waters into mercy, and nothing can keep us apart. So remember your people, remember your children, remember your promise, oh God. Your grace is enough, your grace is enough, your grace is enough for me. Your love and justice, God. You use the weak to lead the strong. You lead us in the song of your salvation, and all your people sing along. So remember your people, remember your children, remember your promise, oh God. Your grace is enough, your grace is enough, your grace is enough for me. Enough. Your grace is enough. Your grace is enough for me. So remember your people, remember your children, remember your promise, oh God. Your grace is enough. enough. Your grace is enough for me. Yeah, your grace is enough. Heaven reaching down to us. Your grace is enough for me. Hey, your grace is enough, and I'm covered in your love. Your grace is enough for me, for me. For me, yeah.
Oh, that's great, Billy. Thanks so much. We got a couple announcements for you here as we are wrapping up. First of all, if you would like to give, donate, and help us out financially here at the Pathways Church community, you can do that by going to our website at findpathways.com/donate. And if you go there, you can set up a one-time gift or a recurring gift. And I want to say thank you to those of you who are contributing financially to keep this whole thing together. Man, we appreciate that. This is a ministry that is reaching out to people who really just haven't been able to find a way forward in other church contexts. And we're trying to create a permissive space for people to ask a lot of questions. And it's not like super popular in the Christian world to do what we're doing. And so I appreciate your support in helping us do that. And so if you want to donate today, you're welcome to do that. We're a couple other things that are happening. We are going to have an anniversary party for ourselves here, and we like to do that every year. And so next week on October 23rd at 10 a.m., we're throwing ourselves an anniversary celebration, and we are going to be meeting in our in-person space. There won't be any online content next week, but don't worry, you won't miss any of the series. We're just going to be having an anniversary celebration together. So if you live nearby, within a reasonable driving distance, I'd encourage you to come join us. We're doing like a potluck brunch. If you can bring something to share, that's great. If not, that doesn't matter. Just come along and enjoy the time. We're going to have a chance to talk together a little bit about our community, where we see ourselves going. In some cases, we're just going to be introducing ourselves to one another a little bit and have a chance to celebrate what God is doing here in this group. And so we'd love for you to join us for that. Then also this week is our North version of the Theology Pub. We did our South version last week. This week on Thursday, we're going to be meeting in Marysville at 5 Rights Brewing at 6:30 p.m. Last week here in our online space and our in-person gatherings, we looked at the story of the rich young ruler, and there's just a lot to talk about in that story. So we are going to be discussing that again this Thursday. So if you want to join us, we'd love for you to have just an opportunity to be hanging out with us there. It would be great. Then also, if you want to get our email newsletter, like kind of announcements and stuff that's going on within the Pathways Church, you can make sure you're added to that newsletter. If you haven't received it, then you can jump on Facebook and message us there with your name and email, or you can email me, and I'd be happy to add you to the list as well. We are going to have some fall groups starting. We're going to be talking about that at our party here this next Sunday, getting people together and organizing some dinner groups for people to be meeting together regularly and get to know each other a little better and have some friends in this group, develop some relationships where we can take care of one another better. So that's pretty much it. Next week, we won't have any online gathering here, as I said. So hopefully you stay healthy this week. Hopefully the smoke abates a bit and we get back to something that looks a little bit more like our normal fall weather. Then in 2 weeks, we'll pick up again here with our series. Okay? All right. Hope you have a really great week, and we will see you next time. Bye.